Hi, thank you so much for joining us today for our Emotional Resilience series. This webinar features Peggy Crawford and Roz Kalb, two psychologists who will be discussing fostering resilience through wellness practices. In the Emotional Resilience series, we have 5 webinars along with accompanying toolkits. Here's a list of the topics that we'll be covering. I encourage you to check out our website for these webinars as well as the associated toolkits. The toolkits include conversation starters, tips for proactive problem solving, and helpful resources. I'd like to pass the webinar off to our speakers tonight. So Roz and Peggy, please take it away.
Thanks very much, Krista. I'm Roz Kalb. I'm a clinical psychologist and a senior programs consultant with Can Do Multiple Sclerosis. I've been a proud part of that staff for, 16 or 17 years, and I've been in the field of MS for 40 years, many of those working with my dear friend and colleague, Peggy Crawford. Peggy, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Roz. I am Peggy Crawford. I am also a clinical psychologist. And I have worked in MS for well over 20 years now, and much of that time as a consultant to Can Do. And I'm currently living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and proud of it. Roz, you're going to get us started?
I am. So Peggy and I gave a lot of thought to this, and our learning objectives for this webinar are for participants and support partners to be able to define what we mean by resilience and the factors that may increase or decrease a person's sense or feeling of resilience. We want people to be able to list at least 3 characteristics of life with MS that challenge resilience, and be able to provide at least 3 examples of wellness behaviors that can increase your sense of resilience. We also want you to be able to explain why communication is the first step to increasing resilience. Okay, going back to the beginning. Thanks, Peggy. I'm happy to share our learning objectives with our audience. We want participants and support partners to be able to define what we mean when we talk about resilience and describe the factors that may increase or decrease a person's sense of personal resilience. We want folks to be able to list at least 3 characteristics of life with MS that challenge resilience. And this is true whether you're a person living with MS or a support partner. This is for both of you. We want you to be able to provide at least 3 examples of wellness behaviors that can increase your own sense of resilience. And we want each of you to be able to explain why communication is the first step to increasing resilience through wellness behaviors. So Peggy, help us understand what resilience is.
Thanks, Roz. Resilience is a term that we're hearing more and more about these days. And we're going to give you some sense of what we mean by resilience. When we say resilience, we're really talking about that ability to bounce back after difficult events or challenges. And certainly there are many of those that come with the experience of MS. It also refers to being able to cope with what life throws at you. And this year, I think all of us are feeling like there are many things coming at us 24/7. It is that ability to stand up for yourself in challenging situations, to really become an advocate, to speak up on your own behalf, to assert yourself and let people know what you're really thinking and feeling. And one thing that's really important for people to know is that there are people who seem to be born more resilient than others, but anyone can increase their resilience by becoming more aware and trying out new behaviors. Practice, practice, practice.
Such reassuring message to hear from you, Peggy, because this is a difficult year and we're all being challenged to increase our resilience.
So there are some behaviors that just characterize resilience, that kind of come with the territory. So that ability to set and meet personal goals in spite of challenges or obstacles. So to set goals that are reasonable, to identify steps that are going to help you get closer to attaining that goal, and then giving yourself credit for when you do attain the goal. Persistence. Persistence means sticking with something and encouraging yourself and others to keep trying, to not give up. If you don't meet success right away, keep going. Also, resilience refers to being open to help and support in the many forms that it comes. Hearing feedback from people. I was thinking about this earlier, and I realized that probably one of the people from whom you get regular feedback or can get regular feedback is yourself. Most of us are doing a lot of talking to ourselves these days, spending more and more time indoors and not in our usual activities. So listen to what people have to say about what you're doing, what they notice, what they observe. And also, when people recognize you for something that you've accomplished, people seem to have difficulty taking this in, but take it seriously. Flexibility is another part of resilience. And whenever I think about flexibility, I always think about how people with MS, and really all of us who are trying to move around, are encouraged to stretch on a regular basis. So people are used to stretching muscles. But in this case, we're encouraging you to stretch your behavioral muscles, to try out new ways of approaching situations. Resilience also includes the use of effective problem-solving strategies. So this includes steps like really taking some time on the front end before you start throwing solutions at a situation to think about what is the problem really, identifying more than one potential solution, experimenting, and then if something doesn't work, being willing to go back and try something else on the list. Compassion is also another term that we're hearing a lot about. And I think really what we're talking about here is being kinder and gentler with yourself, but also expressing and demonstrating compassion to other people, being able to forgive yourself and forgive others. Also, the recognition of personal strengths. People have a tendency to focus in on what they think is weak about themselves. And there are many personal strengths that people don't always recognize. Sometimes other people recognize them first. And then being willing to go back and think about what you've done well, when you've been successful, and apply that, using that as fuel in your current situations.
All great advice. And I'm sitting here myself thinking about how I could incorporate these strategies into my own life to feel more resilient. So thank you. So we know that MS is a challenging chronic illness. We hear it from people all the time. Peggy and I have been hearing this from individuals and families living with MS for many years. And we know that this disease, as well as other chronic illnesses, can really challenge feelings of resilience in the whole family. It's an unpredictable disease. And if we hear anything else from folks, it's that if we just knew what was going to happen next, we could plan better, we could problem solve better. But the fact is, it remains a very unpredictable disease. Also, many of the symptoms of MS, if not most, are invisible to other people. And so it's hard for the people around you to understand what's going on. And it puts a real burden on the person with MS to be a teacher all the time, to explain what they're experiencing, what the symptoms are like, why those symptoms interfere. And it's a disease that's characterized by periodic losses. It may change a person's abilities to do the things they used to do or force them to do things differently. It may impact the roles that one has in the family. And this is true whether you're the person with MS or you're a support partner, where suddenly your roles have to shift to accommodate the demands of the disease. And certainly people's dreams, things that may have seemed The guiding light for individuals and families may suddenly have to be changed in the face of MS. And these losses can be painful and really make one feel more vulnerable in the face of the disease and less resilient. Certainly, it's an expensive disease. And there's nothing more frightening, I think, than feeling financially vulnerable. And so the expenses related to the disease and learning how to manage those expenses can contribute to greater resilience if those are challenges you're facing. Individual MS symptoms. Everybody's symptoms are different, and everybody's symptoms create different kinds of challenges for them depending on their lifestyle and their priorities and their work. But certainly those MS symptoms can make one feel less resilient. And sometimes it just feels that MS is taking over one's life, that it's just interfering with all your goals, all your priorities, or your roles. And when that feeling happens, you certainly feel less resilient, less able to bounce back and do the things that Peggy was describing. And when we don't have adequate support from other people, we always feel threatened, right? We need that support and encouragement so that when things are tough, we don't feel all alone. And we feel more resilient when others are in our corner cheering us along. So clearly, MS poses challenges for everyone living with the disease and for support partners. So now we want to look at the wellness wheel. And at Can Do MS, we talk a lot about wellness and the components of wellness because it is our role to help people figure out how to enhance their wellness in each of these areas. So we're going to talk together, Peggy and I, about ways that you can increase your resilience in each of these areas. Now, you may focus on one or another of these as your priorities, but we just want you to see this all laid out because at different points in your life, you may focus on these different areas and prioritize them for yourself. So let's talk first about diet, exercise, and healthy behaviors. So
We're going to start.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So here's something that Peggy and I hear. We used to love to hike on the weekends, but now my fatigue and balance problems make it incredibly difficult. So Peggy, what would be some steps that an individual and a couple could take to try and address this problem?
Well, I think, Roz, one of the first steps, in fact, probably the first step and the most essential first step in dealing with any of these challenges is to talk about the changes with one another, to talk about what you've noticed. So the person with MS, how is fatigue and balance really interfering with that hiking, which clearly was something that this couple loved. And in addition, getting the input from the support partner. What have they noticed, if anything? And often these are not experiences that people have really shared before. And sometimes people are really surprised what the other person says. But this is really the essential first step. And also, not just to share experience related to how the physical symptoms are interfering, but also what kind of feelings, what kind of emotions does this stir up for people? And it could be loss of activity, loss of time together, loss of ability. But often people are frustrated with the situation, nervous, anxious. And again, these are frequently feelings that people have not shared, in part because they don't want to upset the other person. We hear that frequently from folks. It's also useful to think about exploring new ways to do old activities and being willing to try new ones. So in this scenario, even thinking about, is it the time of day that makes it difficult for balance and fatigue with hiking? Is it how far you try to hike? Is it where you go? Would level ground be a good place to start? And also thinking about what is it that's most important to you about this activity? Is it truly the spending time together? So there might be other ways to do that. And don't forget about your MS care team. There may be one or multiple people on the team who could be helpful. So in this case, consulting with a physical therapist to learn about tools and strategies, perhaps even assistive devices that will enable you to stay physically active on your own, but also together with other people. And as we said before, being willing to experiment and be adventuresome. Try things out. If they don't work, you can always go back to what you were doing before or something else on that list that you've generated.
Great. So now let's do the same thing for relationships, another important component of wellness. My family is complaining that I'm always in a lousy mood. So, Peggy, what are some steps?
So again, first step, you know where we're headed here. Talk about the mood changes and how they feel for both of you. And again, you may be surprised what the other person has noticed. And just to be open about how you're feeling and how the situation is affecting you. It also helps to be very specific. I think in communication in general, the more specific you can be, the more likely the other person will understand what you're really trying to say and communicate. So, what are some specific situations that seem to trigger the so-called lousy mood? And brainstorm about how they could be handled differently. And when I thought about this earlier, I also thought about, are there particular times of the day that the mood seems to be more lousy, or days of the week? I'm thinking about when people first get home from work. That often is a really stressful time for folks and brings out all kinds of mood issues. It's also helpful to educate yourselves about the relationship between MS and mood changes, which are incredibly common. And this isn't just true for the person with MS, but also for support partners as well. So it helps to have that background information. And you might want to consider that depression might be the source of the irritability. Irritability, we know, is often how depression presents for people with MS. You want to discuss the mood changes with your healthcare provider and request a depression screen. This can be done with a few questions and to really find out. It's sort of like stepping on the scale. If you want to know what you weigh, which many people don't, but in this case, it's important to know, are you depressed or not? So being screened for that and being able to get a measurement of your mood. And certainly when recommendations are made for treatment, that you follow those recommendations. And if you have concerns about them, to express those concerns, or really identify up front, what do you think might get in the way of following the recommendations? But be open to what people are encouraging you to try.
So now let's look at work and home, another very important component of wellness. Lately, our household has felt chaotic and out of control. Peggy, what should we do about that?
Once again, we're going to turn to our first step of talking about specific examples of chaos and being as specific as possible. And also keep in mind that what one person in the household may feel as chaotic may not feel chaotic to someone else. So again, getting on the same page with other people. You also want to talk about, how is this chaos affecting you? And unfortunately, for people with MS, if there are cognitive issues present already, chaos can really just intensify those difficulties. But the chaos be contributing to other MS symptoms as well. So it's also useful to explore MS symptoms that could be contributing. So that might be cognitive difficulties. It might be fatigue. It might be pain that's getting in the way of getting things done. And then, of course, to discuss your concerns about those symptoms with your MS provider. And keep in mind that there are multiple people on your MS care team that could be helpful to you in this particular situation and help you build your resilience. So folks like language and speech pathologists can be very helpful if there are concerns about cognitive abilities and functioning for an assessment, complete an assessment, and then they can also help you come up with strategies that you could apply in your particular situation. Occupational therapists are also helpful, particularly around things like household organization and how you go about managing various household tasks. I also think that these are the kinds of tips that would be useful to share then with everyone at home, because everyone can benefit from improved organization. So let people at home know what you're trying to work on so that they can reinforce and give you feedback, and you can give feedback to them as well. This allows you to work together to implement the solutions and ideas that you've generated. So now we're going to move on to some other scenarios and other components of wellness. In this case, emotional wellness. So here's a possible scenario. Everything feels overwhelming and painfully bleak to me. Where should we start, Rod?
This is clearly not a good feeling, and nobody will be surprised when I say that you have to start by sharing the feeling. You have to talk about specific issues that feel overwhelming, how they affect you, and encourage your partner or others around you to do the same, because that communication is the foundation for doing all of the next problem-solving steps. As Peggy mentioned before, it's important to learn about the relationship between MS and mood, because there's a very strong relationship. And when Peggy or I hear something like this, everything feels overwhelming and bleak, one of the first things that comes to our minds is a person experiencing depression or anxiety that are just out of control? So you have to consider the possibility that those are playing a part, and request a depression screen or an anxiety screen from your healthcare provider. So you get that baseline and you know what's going on. That's your first step to taking next steps. You might want to consult with a mental health professional like Peggy or me for help and support. Ideally, somebody who is familiar with MS and the kinds of challenges you're living with, but somebody you have a good working relationship is the most important quality you're looking for in a mental health professional to help you problem solve and figuring out how to manage what you're dealing with and build that resilience that is our goal. And I think it's always a good idea to focus on what you can change. Too many of us spend our time worrying about the things we can't change and wishing that we could. And that does more to dampen a feeling of resilience than anything. But when you focus on the one or two issues that you can impact, that you can change successfully, that's when your sense of resilience grows. You can work together with your family members and friends to tackle those issues and feel better. And that will contribute to your overall emotional wellness.
I think, Roz, there's really nothing like success to keep people trying. So that's what you're really describing there.
Yeah.
So moving on to spiritual wellness, a possible comment that we might hear from people is something like, I feel like I've lost my sense of purpose and identity.
I think we hear this particularly from people who've experienced major role changes. They've had to leave work, or their role in the family has shifted because of MS symptoms that are getting in the way. And suddenly they're not sure what their role is or what they're supposed to do from day to day. It's like the MS is kind of taken over. So again, communication is step one, because it's important to share examples of how you feel different from the way you felt before. And doing this with your partner, sharing those feelings of loss related to those role changes or whatever else has happened, will help you begin to think about how to get to a better place. So I think it's important that you then help one another reconnect with the things that make you each feel unique and special and valued in your lives, in your relationship, because you each bring something that is powerful and important to your relationships. And so even if roles have changed or things are feeling rocky, this can help you connect with what's important and what you bring. And as Peggy was talking about before, I think it's incredibly important to practice self-compassion. We tend to be so hard on ourselves, particularly when MS or aging have changed what we can do and the role that we play at work and at home. But self-care, self-compassion helps pave the way for problem solving and finding new opportunities and new roles. And also practicing gratitude for one another, particularly in relationships as they morph over time. It's just so helpful and important that you keep recognizing what you each bring to your partnership and feeling gratitude for that. Remember to share your personal strengths that have served you well in the past. All of you have them. Even though abilities may change, there are personal strengths that you can bring to any situation. Think how they've served you well in the past and how they might apply to your present. And then target one or two issues that you can tackle together to help you feel more centered, more connected to the world, more secure in your grounding. And identify a spiritual practice that feels meaningful to you. And this can be different for every person. For some people, it may be meditating. For some people, it may be doing something with art or music, or just spending time alone and thinking. Any spiritual practice, whether it's religious or not, can help you regain that sense of connectedness to the world around you and help you feel full of purpose and reinforce your identity once again.
And I think, Roz, this is a great example of where people can demonstrate that self-compassion by allowing themselves to set aside that time to carry out and really allow themselves to practice whatever this spiritual time is for themselves.
I agree.
So moving on to intellectual wellness, we might hear people say something like, conversations have become so difficult that we seem to have given up. This is just so important that we give people some guidance here, Roz, about what steps they could take. So where can people start?
Well, believe it or not, Peggy, it's going to start with talking about it. And one of our key takeaway messages here for all of you is that for any area of wellness, starting with a conversation is going to be the best way to go. So find a time, not during an argument, not when tensions are high, but at some calm moment. Talk about what has started to make conversations so difficult and prepare for that conversation. Really think about what it is that you experience as barriers to conversation. Is it time? Is it mood issues? Is it conflict? Whatever it is, it's good to go into this conversation with some ideas about what may be changing your conversations. And describe your feelings about these changes, but talk about your own feelings rather than blaming the other person. It's important to just share if you're feeling lonely, or if this is a loss for you, or you're just missing the connection. Share those feelings. And then it's important to learn about the relationship between MS and cognitive changes. We know that cognition is affected in at least 65% of people with MS, and cognitive changes can have a significant impact on conversations. Carrying out the conversations, remembering the conversations, being able to focus on the conversations. So it is essential, you're a person living with MS, to request a cognitive evaluation from your MS provider. The National MS Society recommends that everybody have a cognitive screening at the time of diagnosis and then every year after that, because we want to track those changes. And an evaluation can actually help you identify the problems that are contributing to your conversation difficulties. So the evaluation gives very important feedback to help you problem solve around cognitive changes. And then you can work with a rehabilitation professional, often a speech language pathologist, sometimes a neuropsychologist or an occupational therapist, again, critical members of the healthcare team, to learn some compensatory strategies that you can use to help make conversations more successful if cognitive problems are getting in the way. And together, the person with MS and the support partner can actually practice these strategies to ensure that their conversations happen in a good, distraction-free place where they have a chance to be successful. Continue to pursue activities, because another part of intellectual wellness is staying active with your mind, staying stimulated and engaged and excited about the world around you. So whether it's old activities that you've always enjoyed or new activities that you want to try, continue to pursue those to stimulate your mind, stay interested and engaged. And that takes us through the wellness wheel. So, Peggy, how do the strategies that we've talked about in each of these areas help build resilience?
I think they really help build resilience, both on an individual basis and for people along with the other people in their lives. So those partnerships. So each success builds feelings of confidence, self-esteem, motivation, and courage to keep going despite obstacles, challenges, and ongoing self-doubts, which everybody experiences. So you can see the impact in the building of resilience for an individual. But in addition, each success strengthens your partnership with those other people in your life and fuels your commitment to working together. You're going to be stronger working together. It helps to have more than one person on your team to meet challenges and solve problems as they come up in your lives. And these are ways of addressing issues for everyone, not just the person with MS, but support partners as well. Everyone can benefit from building resilience and having greater emotional wellness. So in addition to the ideas that we've shared with you today about how to approach these possible scenarios in your own life and really address all those components on your own wellness wheel, we want you to check out the toolkit that we developed for this webinar. That toolkit includes ideas for conversation starters, because we know that talking, even to people you love and care about, is not always easy. So take a look at our conversation starters as examples that you could use. They're also step-by-step problem-solving ideas, because again, we take for granted that everybody has really good problem-solving skills, and that's not always the case. So you need more practice with that. And then also there are a number of additional resources if you want more information about resilience and other issues that we've talked about today. And we thank you all for spending this time with us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to do programs with you, Peggy. I look forward to more. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this program.